Tonight on 5 on Your Side, weeks of waiting end in anger.
Today we will proclaim justice or else.
A judge declares a former police officer not guilty of murder, leaving a family grieving a second time.
My soul is burning. My heart is broken.
Old wounds reopened as a city relives its pain.
Tonight, a governor's call for peace.
We're going to protect everyone's constitutional rights, and we are not going to tolerate violence.
Amid cries for justice and change.
We will not be divided.
No, sir.
And we will not take this anymore.
This is 5 on Your Side.
Protests and unrest once again strike St. Louis. After weeks of waiting, hundreds of protesters take to the streets following a judge's decision.
Hundreds are calling for justice after a judge found former St. Louis police officer Jason Stockley not guilty of murder. Now, 12 hours later, the protests continue. St. Louis police say agitators have converged on St. Louis Mayor Lyda Krewson's house, throwing rocks and breaking windows. Here's what we know right now about the latest unrest. The protests today remain mostly peaceful. Officers have arrested at least 13 people so far.
Police say protesters assaulted 4 officers. All have minor injuries. The protesters started downtown this morning and have traveled around the city. Now they've moved to the central West End.
We have team coverage tonight from the protests and reactions to the governor's response and calls for change in the criminal justice system.
Let's begin with 5 on Your Side's Casey Nolan. He reports on the latest unrest in the central West End. Casey.
Mike and Ann, things have changed here in the last 30 minutes or so. In one way, unfortunately, as you mentioned off the top there, this has gone from a very much a peaceful protest, large peaceful protest, to reports of violence. You mentioned the mayor's house. I have not put eyes on it myself, but the mayor is a longtime alderman from this neighborhood, still lives in this neighborhood. The police are reporting, we've heard from firefighters here as well, that protesters have broken windows at her house. That's all we know at this time. We also know that firefighters got reports of a dumpster fire. They're looking for a dumpster fire here in the Central West End. The other way it has changed, what you see behind me now, or what you just saw, much different than the video you can see right now. Around 7 o'clock, a large group of people, a few hundred, 200 or 300 people started from Euclid and Maryland, kind of the heart of the Central West End. They marched down to Forest Park Parkway, past some restaurants, past some people dining out, and then they turned right, went to Kings Highway, and then shut down part of Kings Highway and marched on to Kings Highway and Interstate 64, Highway 40. Tried to get onto the interstate. We believe that was their goal, but they were not successful as police had all of those entrance ramps and exits cut off. They then turned around, came back to the heart of the Central West End. Throughout that time, the crowd grew. That's about a roughly 5-mile area they covered over the couple of hours. The crowd grew to at least 500 people, I would estimate. Down through the residential area, we started to see them break off into different areas, and then a short time after that, we heard reports of activity at the mayor's house. We were also able to speak to some folks before we got news that things may have turned ugly here in the Central West End. Here's what they had to say as they were marching, as they were in the streets.
This time the protest is different because it's not going to stop. It's not going to end. We're going to keep going until our voice is heard. We're educated and we have degrees, and we're going to fight on foot and on paper.
We've been telling these young people, work through the system. Okay, the system is not working for people that look like me. These young people are fed up. They feel like they have nothing to lose. So I'm trying to support them, trying to tell them, yes, we can make this work if we all come together.
At times, the crowd here seemed to be supportive of the protesters and some of their chants. We heard some Black Lives Matter chants coming from apartments, and the protesters would respond to that. However, the chants they were shouting to the crowds, to some of the folks on the sidewalks, were, if you're going to kill our people, we're going to kill your economy. And then they also said, get out of the bars, get into the streets. The message being, if you're sympathetic and not do anything, that doesn't help the situation. And then, of course, we did hear some folks who did not want to see these folks here, and we certainly saw that on social media as we were broadcasting some of it live, people getting frustrated with the congestion here in the neighborhood and blocking traffic and whatnot. One thing we should mention, along Kings Highway, of course, is Barnes Jewish Hospital. There were a couple of moments there where we saw an ambulance and then a police escorted family trying to get to the hospital. The family said they had a woman in labor. The protesters did let those folks through. There was a small delay, but as far as we could tell, until this latest events that we are hearing from the police at the mayor's house, things were peaceful. We'll send it back to you in the studio.
All right, Casey, thanks very much, and we want you to stay safe. Police, firefighters, and the governor are watching the protests.
Governor Eric Greitens promised to let people speak out, but said he would not tolerate violence. 5 on your side's Christina Coleman continues our team coverage from the Central West End with more on the governor's message. Christina?
Well, as for the governor talking about these people speaking out, they are certainly doing that tonight. They are gathered right now here behind me in the middle of this intersection at Kings Highway and Waterman. Now, just moments ago, we actually saw at least 10 police cars with sirens on heading west down Waterman. Now, it is not clear what they were heading towards, but that is what we witnessed just now. Now, this is some of the video of the protests that were happening a little bit earlier tonight. The governor told us he was very grateful to see people peacefully protesting throughout the day. He also thanked the Missouri State Highway Patrol for keeping protesters off major highways. Greitens says his focus is now on keeping citizens safe throughout the night, making his message clear that violence would not be tolerated.
My message to the people of Missouri tonight is that we're going to protect everyone's constitutional rights and we are not going to tolerate violence. And I'd ask everyone who's watching this tonight to make sure that if you are out on the streets, people have the right after this verdict, if they want to protest, if they are hurt, if they are in pain, they have the right to protest, and they should know that our law enforcement officers are there to protect them. And we all, every single one of us, have to make good decisions tonight.
Now, the governor has activated the Missouri National Guard. Those teams are on standby tonight. And as you could tell, the people out here, they continue to protest. I asked one of the main organizers how long the protests would be going on tonight. He says his goal is for people to not sleep tonight. So we'll continue to monitor this developing situation, watch as this crowd continues to walk along Kings Highway and throughout the Central West End. At this point, there is no any indication of them getting tired. All right, goodbye, back to you.
All right, Christina, and we need you to stay safe again. If our reporters need to stay away from these protesters, we will get back at a good, safe distance. The protest started downtown today, and that's where police had their first encounter with protesters. Dozens of protesters tried to shut down I-64 near Scott Trade Center. Officers blocked them with their bikes.
And this evening, police tweeted out pictures of what protesters threw. Everything in that picture, from rocks to water bottles, some toilet paper, even an apple. Jennifer Meckles followed the protest downtown all day. Jen?
Good evening, Ann. Much more quiet this evening in downtown St. Louis, but this was the primary place in the first place that protesters gathered today. Now, for the most of the day, they remained peaceful, and this was a non-violent protest. But police tell us late this afternoon that at times it became unlawful and they had to act.
No justice! No peace!
Almost immediately after the judge's decision Friday morning, protesters started to fill the streets in downtown St. Louis.
If the verdict would have been different, if the announcement would have been different, then you would have had a different outcome and different result. You wouldn't have what you see right now. But since we have his not guilty verdict and everyone anticipated it, this is the response you're going to get.
The crowd grew larger with every hour, and protesters were on the move. Mostly they marched and did so peacefully, chanting, singing, carrying signs.
I'm here because racism is systemic, and the only way that we can get any attention drawn to that system is by being loud.
But when demonstrators tried to access the interstate, they were met by police on bikes who blocked exit ramps. At times, the meetings grew heated.
There have been some tense moments where agitators became destructive and assaulted police officers.
Early evening at Tucker and Clark, police, trying to move the line of demonstrators back, say some in the crowd threw rocks and water bottles at officers. Others damaged a cruiser. Several times, police sprayed their mace toward the crowd.
Our department is committed to ensuring every citizen's First Amendment rights. However, we were equally committed to enforcing the law.
Now, Interim Police Chief Lawrence O'Toole tells us that Interim Police Chief Lawrence O'Toole tells us tonight that 4 of his officers got hurt today, things like a water bottle flying through the air or falling off a bike, being pushed off of a bike, but they are okay. And that the police department made 13 arrests today, things like assaulting an officer, disturbing the peace, and failure to disperse. Live downtown, Jennifer Meckles, 5 on your side.
The mother of Anthony Lamar Smith gathered with politicians, clergy members, and protesters in North St. Louis, where her 24-year-old son was killed. They talked about feeling unprotected by the legal system. Smith's mother spoke at the gathering, saying she felt the judge's ruling wasn't right.
My soul is burning, my heart is broken. I say I ain't get no justice. I could never be at peace.
Friends of the Smith family tell 5 on your side that Smith's mother will be seeking an attorney. She believes that her civil rights might have been violated. So how did we get here?
While the city has simmered, waiting for a decision for the last 5 weeks, the case actually stretches back 6 years. December 20th, 2011. Jason Stockley shoots and kills Anthony Lamar Smith following a suspected drug deal and police pursuit. The case took a lot of complicated turns over the next 5 years. In June 2012, St. Louis Circuit Attorney Jennifer Joyce announced there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute Stockley. On May 16, 2016, citing new undisclosed evidence, Joyce announces first-degree murder charges against Stockley. Stockley waived his right to a jury trial, opting for the case to be heard only by a judge. The trial began on August 1st. 5 weeks later, Judge Timothy Wilson declared Stockley not guilty.
By the way, we just want you to know that we talked to our reporter Christina Coleman. You saw during her live shot some protesters come up to her location. She is doing fine and she is okay. Now, there are calls for change in the future. Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner criticized the judge's ruling.
She wants to overhaul how the state prosecutes officer-involved shooting. 5 on your side, Jacob Long continues our team coverage. He's live from downtown St. Louis. Jacob?
Well, Mike and Ann, Gardner was not in office when Smith was killed, nor was she in office when Jason Stockley was charged. Essentially, she inherited this very, very high-profile case just last year when she was first elected into this office. And now with this major decision happening on her watch, she tells me there needs to be a complete overhaul moving forward in pursuing justice.
Needless to say, I'm disappointed with the court's decision.
St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner said Friday she respects the judge's decision but stands by her team's case.
I believe we presented a submissible case for first-degree murder on Jason Stockley.
Prosecutors alleged at trial that Stockley did not shoot and kill 24-year-old Anthony Lamar Smith in self-defense in 2011 and that he is on video planting a gun in Smith's car to try and cover it up. But in a 30-page court ruling, the court disagreed, finding Stockley not guilty.
The most important thing you see in that video is what you don't see, and that is a gun, okay? And there's no way, it's not physically possible for him to have pulled a gun out of his bag and had it in his hand and had that not be on the video.
The controversial decision is the first big loss for Gardner's 9 months in office, and she says it actually highlights a larger problem.
We must re-examine not just how we prosecute these cases, but how we investigate them.
Right now, Gardner says St. Louis police investigate their own officer-involved shootings, a practice that she now wants to end.
But we need to have an independent and fair investigation in these cases because they're difficult. There's an uphill battle in terms of officer-involved shootings.
Yeah, so we asked her today at that news conference, well, what exactly does that look like? And Gardner says in her mind, she would like to have a third-party independent agency come into the city whenever there's an officer-involved shooting to investigate that case under her watch, with her office taking the lead. She also says the state of Missouri really needs to take a much harder look at the self-defense laws on the book as they pertain to law enforcement officers. Reporting live in downtown St. Louis, Jacob Long, 5 on your side.
So we want to hear from you. You can log on to ksdk.com/vote now to cast a vote. Do you think an independent third party should investigate officer-involved shootings? Yes or no?
You can vote using the KSDK app again, or you can go to ksdk.com/vote now, and we'll have those results coming up.
Also new tonight, a decision that some activists call troubling. The U.S. Justice Department is rolling back regulations and oversight for troubled police departments. For years, The Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services has investigated issues with police. The DOJ says the Civil Rights Division could take over those responsibilities. It's another way the Trump administration, people say, is taking a pro-police stance.
Our coverage never stops at Ksdk.com.
We have more on today's protests, reaction from Stockley's attorneys, Smith's family, and community leaders on the website and on the KSDK app. A city on edge as protests and unrest dominate St. Louis headlines. Next, how the community can heal and the state of race relations in St. Louis.
Our team coverage continues after the break, but first, a look at some of the sights from today's protests downtown.
It's been an emotional day in St. Louis with anger, frustration, and stakeholders sounding off.
As one local leader put it, race relations took a hit. Here's 5 on your side's Art Holiday.
Brothers and sisters, what you see here is the future. You got young people, old people, middle-aged, black, white, Christian, Muslim.
I think it does send a resounding message out there that this is not an angry African American community responding to a particular verdict. It is a diverse community that is responding, and they're responding in ways that are peaceful. They're responding in ways that are forceful.
We will not be divided. No, sir. And we will not take this anymore. No.
We're angry. Everyone is angry. Everyone is frustrated, disappointed, feel no hope whatsoever.
I understand the verdict has created frustration and anger for many in our community.
But this should be a wake-up call. This should be another shove to say, hey, St. Louis, you got a major problem and you're failing to address it.
We cannot reverse the judge's decision. What we can do at this point in time is find ways to ensure that none of this has to happen again.
When there is an officer-involved shooting, have a neutral arbitrator step in. It's very difficult for a prosecutor's office who work with law enforcement on a daily basis to then turn around and start to investigate and maybe prosecute a case.
Protests are, they say, rehearsals for the revolution, and that this is the time to make sure you're registered to vote, to get involved. This is the time to be smart, to educate yourself, because we need you to be leading us.
Everyone has to take a leadership role right now. Everyone has to make a conscious decision to begin to allow for new ideas and fresh approaches. We can't come with the same soup and warm it up over again.
In a stunning announcement earlier this week, a former police officer called for a conviction in the Jason Stockley murder trial, and he called today's ruling disheartening.
The public needs to know there are officers who risk their lives every day who are disgusted by what they saw Jason Stockley do and by today's decision.
Reddit Hudson is the co-founder of the National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice, and he was part of a video that called for Stockley's conviction. He says being a police officer is a noble profession, but there's not enough accountability.
Too many officers leverage that to commit crimes, violate the rights, human rights, civil rights, and civil liberties of the people that they're sworn to serve, and we have to work to change that standard so that we can begin to see some real accountability.
Hudson says the NCLEOJ is made up of retired and former law enforcement officers from a myriad of police agencies across the country.
This case and this decision brings up memories of Ferguson for many of you, including the family of Michael Brown.
So I can understand how the family actually feel, you know. So all I can do is just be here and support the family.
That is Michael Brown Sr., the father of Michael Brown Jr., who was shot and killed in Ferguson 3 years ago. He told the Smith family to never give up and persevere through faith and hope. Brown says he did not take part in today's protests. In addition to the shooting death of Michael Brown, there have been several high-profile officer-involved shootings in the past few years.
In November of 2014, 12-year-old Tamir Rice was shot and killed in Cleveland, Ohio. Rice was holding a toy gun. A grand jury decided not to indict the 2 police officers involved. On June 5th, 2016, 37-year-old Alton Sterling was shot and killed by police in Baton Rouge. Officers can be heard yelling he's got a gun in cell phone video before the incident. Federal prosecutors decided not to seek charges. 1 day later, 32-year-old Philando Castile was shot by a police officer during a traffic stop in St. Paul, Minnesota. His girlfriend streamed the aftermath on Facebook, and Castile later died. A jury acquitted the officer of all charges earlier this year.
People have been talking about pepper spray on social media. Kayla Reed says protesters have shut down Highway 64 downtown, and police are threatening pepper spray. Hashtag Anthony Lamar Smith. It was used by police during protests downtown. There's been some debate, some confusion, even among legal experts about how police can use pepper spray. So we set out to verify those new rules. The rules about pepper spray have changed a lot since Ferguson. That's because protesters sued the Unified Command. That's St. Louis City and County Police, plus the Missouri Highway Patrol. They said using chemical agents to break up crowds violates First Amendment rights. Protesters filed that lawsuit, which we were able to find. That lawsuit clearly lays out the new rules for using chemical agents, including pepper spray. Officers must use clear and unambiguous warnings. They also need to give people time to leave that area. But the St. Louis City Interim Police Chief Lawrence O'Toole says there is an exception.
We're fully aware of that order, and we are following that order. But again, that order also contained language in there that said if there's not time for that because we're under attack, that we can utilize chemical munitions.
We found that exception in the ruling, and so yes, Chief O'Toole's statement is verified. The lawsuit settlement says none of those new rules apply to situations that turn violent and when bodily harm or damage to property is imminent. Stay with 5 on your side for more continuing coverage of the decision and any protests overnight. We will only break in if those protests warrant or if there's a public safety threat. We will also have updates online and on Facebook Live. Our Today in St. Louis coverage begins tomorrow morning at 6 a.m.
And we're back more with our team coverage after this.
Want to update you on the weather. It is going to be another hot one tomorrow, mainly clear to get the day started, and it will remain clear overnight. Sunny and hot tomorrow, that high near 91. As we take a look at the big picture here, we have winds coming up tonight from the south and the southeast. They've been blowing about 5 to 10, occasionally 15 miles per hour or so. We have a front off to the north. This is going to drop through on Sunday, giving us a chance for some isolated to maybe scattered showers and a couple of storms we're going to be watching. Until then, again, a lot of sunshine for tomorrow. Futurecast very straightforward. We'll see the clear skies overnight tonight, sunshine tomorrow, the temperatures, the big story. And then as we get into Sunday, you'll notice the approach of that front and the possibility of those stray showers or storms across parts of the region. So that's the way it's going to go. Some more unsettled weather into Monday and maybe later during the week. Temperatures right now still quite warm across the region, as you can see. As we look at the airport conditions right now, we're at 80 degrees and the winds are south-southeast at Lambert at 13 miles per hour. Here's a look at the 7-day forecast. The temperatures tomorrow near 91. I mentioned that will be near 90 on Sunday and a little cooler into Monday. Guys, back to you.
All right, Craig, thanks very much. And we are now hearing from St. Louis City Police. They are saying on their Twitter feed that tear gas was deployed because agitators became violent toward officers and destroyed property at Kings Highway and Waterman.
This is a live look from our chopper of the Central West End. You can see a lot of police presence. And again, police also said they gave 2 warnings, 2 commands that it was unlawful to disperse, and then the tear gas Mike mentioned. More coverage of the Jason Stockley decision after this.
We're back again with our top story. Protests have now stretched past the 12-hour mark following a judge's ruling.
The judge decided former officer Jason Stockley is not guilty for shooting and killing Anthony Lamar Smith. Protests started downtown today. They've now moved to the Central West End. Agitators recently just broke windows at Mayor Leiter Crusen's house. Officers are now calling it an unlawful assembly. They're ordering everyone to leave the Central West End, and they are now using tear gas after several of those warnings. 4 officers have been injured, though those injuries are minor. Police have arrested more than a dozen people throughout the day as protests continue.
The circuit attorney criticized the judge's decision. Now she's calling for a change in policy. She wants a third party to investigate officer-involved shootings, not police.
Sorry, we asked you, should a third party investigate officer-involved shootings? Here are the results. We had 600 people vote in this. 57% of you said yes. 33% said no.
5 on Your Side has a full crew monitoring protests overnight. Our plan is to break into coverage when warranted if there's a threat to public safety. Stay with 5 on Your Side for more team coverage tomorrow morning, all night long on Ksdk.com. And don't forget, on Today in St. Louis begins at 6 a.m. And our coverage never ends, as we said, on Ksdk.com and our social media, where we invite you to share your thoughts and criticisms. And there you have it, 5 on Your Side at 10 as you look at chopper shots right now of the Central West End.
We will continue to monitor the situation. You see a lot of fire crews and police on the scene. The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon, is next. And thanks for watching.